Another day, another bit of cozy horror with your favorite narrator. Or, I hope I'm your favorite narrator. Hey everybody, it's Dr. Plague. Welcome back for more cozy horror with me, Dr. Plague. So, let's get right into it with more great stories and more great times. Living out in the middle of nowhere is kind of a mixed bag. It has its ups, it has its downs, it has its problems, and it often has its solutions. But today, we're going to explore a story about someone living way out in the middle of nowhere. Because sometimes it's not so great to live in nowhere North America. I want to feel something again. The trees are bare. I watch them from the windows. Their limbs dance in the wind. Limbs too thin, like the arms of dying men, like the elbows of the sick. Too many limbs dancing their sickly dance, painting me with their moving patterns. I've become a canvas, it seems. I cough into my arm. It's that time of the year again. Nearly winter, and many of us are coughing. An elderly couple walks by the window, hand in hand, and for a moment they're on my chest, because the sun is low. Their shadows bleed onto me, and for a moment they're walking hand in hand across the street as well as on my chest. It was just a moment, though, before their journey made them leap off my shoulder and onto the wall. The man lets go of her hand and coughs into his fist. Out of sight now, but very much in my mind. I envied the couple. I want to be in love. I want to know that feeling again. Any feeling. Oh, but I do know one feeling. It's the only feeling I can recall for certain, because it's the last feeling I ever felt. It lives in my head like a memory, and when I want it, I can conjure it up from deep below the surface, like a demon from hell, or the spirit of a dead and buried horse. Something wild and fierce to ride, a surfer on a rogue wave. Sometimes I do just that, just to feel one thing, anything. Fear. Suffocating fear. Abject fear. Fear, fear, fear. I look for it now and bring it to the surface. I dig it up. My heart matches the speed of its gallop. I stagger and stumble and fall backwards to the floor as I hug my knees and shake. I make a sound, an unconscious sound, a trembling monotone note, the hum of the damned. I'm transported back through time, and suddenly I'm on the dirt road in nowhere North America. My ride is now a cloud of dust on the horizon. Goodbye, joy. Goodbye, other life. Goodbye to so many things, all of them existing in that cloud of dust like an unreachable galaxy. It's dusk, the sun just a red streak below a purple sky. Ahead of me is a house, a quiet, comfy home. The lights are on and cast a tungsten orange glow. Beside the house, there's an axe lodged deep into a stump beside a woodpile. It's my parents' house, and I know it well. I've contributed to that woodpile. I bet that the bottom of the stack could have been my work. The crickets own the night. They play the same song on their endless arena tour. It's a fan favorite. I'll admit that growing up in this bucolic countryside had its luxuries. Clean air, the smell of earth, the lilting hills, the surrounding vibrance and vitality of every living thing. The very ground was rich and fertile, and inside our house, each window was really a painting, and the paintings moved when I moved. The people were kind and neighborly. It was quiet and peaceful and perfect, but something lived with us there. Something cruel and malevolent lurked in the shadow of each peaceful night. Something as rotten and damp as the wood at the bottom of the wood stack invading our comfy home. I knew it because I'd seen it around, watching us, waiting for an opportunity to pounce. I heard it in the silence of the laundry room as I walked by towards the warm, welcoming light of the kitchen. I saw it contort on the walls, black and gangly, too many limbs, thin and sickly, but smiling. It was a disease, and its smell was noxious. I left home early, 16 years old. My parents may not mind living in a haunted house, but I couldn't stomach it. It plagued my mind with troubled thoughts, and I knew that pretty soon I'd do something bad, something terrible. I needed to escape. My thumb took me all the way from nowhere North America to everywhere Earth. I was a rambling man, a hobo king, a rebel and a bum. I got into drugs, fights, bad situations, good situations, all kinds of shit. My life was saturated and beautiful. I was a walking outlaw. I've heard songs about me. I left that peaceful, comfy home and never looked back. I chose to live rough, down in the weeds. I got a phone call one day. I'm not sure how they got my number, but my father called me up. I hadn't spoken to my parents in years. I thought about them nearly every day, but I was on the run. My dreams sometimes took me back, and in my dreams I had premonitions. A cloud of blackbirds covering the sky above my parents' house. A lonely sky of nowhere North America. And on the roof and the eaves and the gutters, they sat and cawed and watched me approach with their terrible ink-splotched eyes. My father's voice was on the phone then, and I was telling Janet to shush, but she was naked and tugging on my sleeve. I told her to hush, but she wouldn't, so I put a finger in my ear and listened to my dad. He sounded sick. He was sick. He begged me to come home, a mixture of feelings, a tie-dyed blend of emotions. I had to go. I owed them that much, didn't I? So I went, all the way from everywhere Earth, back to nowhere North America. It took weeks, and a hand job or two to get there, but I finally made it. I had arrived. I thanked the driver, Tommy was his name, and tapped the hood of his car. He drove off, and I'm here again. Tommy was a dust cloud on the horizon, the sky a deep purple above a streak of red, and there were lights on in the house. But I had lied. There was no axe lodged deep in the stump by the woodpile. That was a wishful thought. Goodbye, axe. Goodbye, woodpile. I walked up the steps, feeling a little uneasy. There were no omens here, no dark birds on the roof. This was not a reoccurrence of my dream, but still, there was something foul in the air. A smell like dead, rotten wood, damp and infested with mites. My father was dying, brain cancer, a baseball-sized tumor, he'd said. One would think you'd be able to see it, pulsating through the skull. I'd spoken with my mother since his summoning call, and she had said that it affected his behavior. It put pressure on the part of his mind where feelings reside. He'd cry for no reason at all. He'd laugh like a child as he swatted at flies. His sickness pressed the keys. He was a carousel of painted horses. The horses went by these names: anger, suffering, pleasure, malcontent, melancholy, indignation, repulsion, curiosity, shame, and fear. What I would do to ride those horses now, but only one was available to me. Before knocking, I glanced to the side, towards the lawn and the woodpile and the lone stump. It wasn't fair for them to bring me back here. It wasn't fair that my father was dying. It wasn't fair that I'd have to expose myself to the contortionist that lived in our house, a disease that dampened all my moods but one, a poltergeist with incredible powers, the power to fill my head with troubled thoughts. I thought of Janet and felt nothing, because I was only a guest in this memory. In the moment, though, in the actual moment that I thought of her, I felt a pang of longing, and for a moment, felt like my heart was attached to a grappling hook, and I reeled on my heels as I tried to step forward, towards the house in its orange glow. I was instead pulled 10 steps backwards, towards the dust on the horizon, away from the empty stump, towards her and our love ballad. I jumped off the horse. I unhinged my knees and let the note drop. I sat on the floor in a shaft of light. The wall behind me was a canvas, and in it my father danced. His frail, sickly limbs waved back and forth. His knobby elbows bent and twisted. In his bony hands he held an axe. It came up and down. Rain like blood began to tap on my windows, and it painted the scene with gore. I wished I could feel something. There's something here that suppresses it all, though. The blunt end of an axe, or a cruel entity in the dark corners of the house. Something powerful, with the ability to cover me up with a smile. Something with the ability to put me in a box and leave me there to scream and suffocate. There's a scar above my right eye. It's where my fear resides. My painted horse. It beckons me, and I climb aboard. It brays, wild and fierce, and I ride that rogue wave with my arms around its neck. I hug my knees and begin to hum. I tremble. The crickets hear an almighty orchestra. I climb the steps and stand on the rickety porch. It needs a new paint job. Maybe red. Or purple. Like the sky. I knock on the door back home, the door to coziness and comfort. But also, not just that. Something evil lives here too. I wait. Goodbye laughter. Goodbye sweet bliss. Goodbye Mom. Goodbye Dad. No one answers. I let myself in. It's not uncommon in the country to leave the doors unlocked, so this doesn't evoke any immediate concern. But I know better, because I'm only visiting. I've been here before, and I know better. My grip tightens around the neck of the beast I ride, my sweaty hands clutching madly at its silky hair, my face buried in a black mane. I let myself in. I can never get out. It's a box in which I suffocate. The wall is a canvas of abstract art. It's smeared red and purple in complex patterns. The paint's still wet. The floor is where you dip your brush, a spreading puddle. My father greets me with a half smile. One side of his face remains in a palsy frown, but the other side of his face was alive and exuberant, exalted even. He must have been very happy to see me, because he practically erupted with lunatic joy, and he danced up and down and did a little spin. And behind his shoulder, something pitch black, black as the eyes of the birds in my dreams, watches us and smiles at me with black teeth. It lifted a thin black hand in a nice-to-meet-you wave. Goodbye, love. Goodbye, trust. My father's arms were thin as my thumb. They were long and skeletal, weak, his legs unstable stilts, shaking under his weight. He held his arms up above his head, and in his hands was an axe. My mother lay at his feet, an open sack of spilled tomatoes, her eyes like empty pits, dead and glaring, admiring the art on the wall. Goodbye, Faith. Goodbye, sweet lullaby. I turned around and stared out at the world through the still open door. A dirt road in the bucolic countryside. A purple sky above nowhere North America. Home, no more. The crickets hit a crescendo, and it was all I could hear. And then I turned back to the horror that I faced, and my father was right before me, exalted, insane, a man possessed. His feeble arms had wondrous strength, for he brought the axe down hard, blunt end first, and it got me right above the eye. Goodbye, feelings. I did not fall unconscious. My vision blurred, and my right eye watched my father dance through a red veil. The artist came in for another stroke, but I knocked him aside. I wanted to scream because the ride was out of control, the carousel spinning too fast. The family I left, the family I always knew was there if I needed them, the family I would have returned to eventually, and the puppeteer in the shadow of the laundry room, standing there, smiling at me. I turned back to my father, who was still within the grips of his frenzy. He wasn't really my father now. He was a skeleton from a zombie flick, and he had strings coming out of his back, strings that led to the laundry room, much like the tether around my heart that led back to Janet. My father was at its mercy, and it did with him as it would. His arms danced above his head, his legs shook at the knees above the shins. I swallowed dry fear. It tasted like venom, and I calmly plucked the axe from his broken-looking fingers. He was agitated and scratched at me. He called me a whore. My father called me a whore. I walked through the front door and gently closed it behind me. My father did not follow. I descended the steps that once led to my childhood home, and in the purple night I swung that bloody axe into the stump where it belonged. I sat down in the grass, a front row ticket to the cricket show, and hugged my knees and joined their song. The song was called Hum of the Damned, and it was a hit. I got off the horse then, the ride finally over. I don't know why I put myself through that sometimes, but I can't go too long in this apathy. Even fear is better than nothing at all. I left my room and the two-way window. Two-way because it was itself just a painting. And when I moved, the painting moved with me. But also, when the sun was angled correctly, the objects in the painting cast themselves through, onto the chests of the viewers and the bare wall beyond. But the sun was low now, a red streak on the horizon. I worked my way slowly, each creaking step. I did not want to wake my new roommate. He nested silently in the laundry room. Carefully, on tiptoes, I stepped to the door and gently pried it open. I was hit by the nippy breeze of November, a sobering cool that drank the sweat from my brow. My fear now a distant memory, I stood on the rickety porch and stared out at the purple sky in which rain somehow fell from a single black cloud above the house. Over on the lawn there was a stump, and protruding from it like an oblong tumor was the hilt of an axe. They meant nothing to me. I'd said my farewells. The crickets sang their song, and I was unmoved. I thought of Janet, and felt nothing at all. I could leave. I knew that. I could walk down the steps and wander forever down the roads to that unreachable galaxy, to mingle as one with all the dust out there on the horizon. I could. But I had strings coming out of my back, and when my master awoke, he would make me dance. I sighed out of habit, because I really didn't feel like anything that should have resulted in a sigh, and went back inside. I tiptoed up the creaky steps and coughed into my arm. I heard something shuffle in the dark of the hallway. I didn't care. I went to my room and shut the door. The sun's down. My wall is bare. I'm bare. Maybe tomorrow there will be more trees like limbs dancing on the wall, or couples coughing. Maybe tomorrow I'll envy the dog who sticks his curious muzzle in the rat-infested drain pipe. Maybe tomorrow I'll go for another ride. But for now, I think I'll sleep. And in my dreams, I'll ride that carousel. I'll take a ride on each horse, Oh, how sweet it will be, my dreams, to feel something, anything, besides that dry venom, besides the taste of that black mane, besides the swell of that rogue wave. How sweet it will be to sit on that cloud of dark birds and call it home. I swear, one of these days I'm going to wear a divot in this couch from sitting here and telling so many great stories. I'm just somebody's half-senile grandpa waiting to happen. In more ways than one, I suppose. We've all had some odd jobs. Maybe we've even served time in the military. If you have, I thank you for your service. But it's always weird when we go on what will probably be our last mission in special operations. I need you to start at the beginning, Marcus. The way he spoke shook me to my core. Everything about him, from his slick-pressed gray suit to his black-top fedora, I could tell he had no background in special operations. I could also tell he was somebody you didn't want to upset, so I did as I was told. The mission towered before us like a shadow in the night, a recon of what we believed to be a terrorist organization's base, nestled deep inside the dense woods of the Appalachian Mountains. We were briefed thoroughly, equipped meticulously, and trained extensively. But, as we approached the seemingly abandoned compound, an unsettling feeling lingered in the air, like a premonition of impending doom. I led a reconnaissance unit, my voice steady as I issued orders over the radio. Stay sharp, everyone. Eyes peeled for any signs of activity. We do not know what we're walking into. The crackling of radio static filled the tense silence as my team spread out, cautiously advancing through the overgrown foliage surrounding the perimeter. Private Ryan Hayes, the youngest member of the team, kept glancing nervously at the dense forest that seemed to swallow the feeble light of the moon. "Sir, I've got movement to the east," Corporal Lisa Alvarez reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "Possible hostile activity," I nodded grimly. "Stay hidden and observe. We need to gather as much intel as we can before making our move." As the minutes stretched into hours, the tension mounted with each passing second. The forest seemed to be holding its breath as if in anticipation of the inevitable. Then, a sudden noise shattered the stillness, a low twig snap that sent Ryan into a cold sweat. "Did anybody else hear that?" Private Hayes asked, his voice trembling. "Negative," I replied, my grip tightening on the rifle. "Stay focused. We're not alone out here." I paused briefly while recounting the stark beginning to the mission Blackhawk, but it was enough to get the man's attention. The look he gave me alone struck fear into my soul. "Continue," he said in a deep, raspy voice. I still remember the taste of damp air. It reminded me of the calm before the storm. Then it happened. Gunfire echoed through the night as unseen assailants ambushed us from all sides. We were prepared for this and shot each body down one by one until only lifeless bodies on the ground remained. Amidst the chaos, Private Hayes found himself separated from the group, his heart pounding in his chest as he darted into the darkness of Appalachia. "Sir, I'm being chased by 3 to 4 hooded attackers requesting immediate backup," Hayes shouted into his radio, his voice laced with panic. "We're on our way, Hayes. Hold tight," I responded, my voice strained with urgency. As gunfire ceased, I noticed Hayes' labored breathing through the radio. His next words caught us off guard. "I'm navigating through a maze of dilapidated buildings. It seems I've lost them." A sense of foreboding washed over all of us. "The air's getting thick, and there's a stench unlike anything I've ever smelled. I see strange symbols covering the walls, Captain. I'm scared," Hayes said, his quivering voice barely audible over the crackling of the radio. As we continued to follow Hayes' tracker, we had also started to catch a slight scent of decay. He had caught it earlier, but this was to be expected, I thought. A few minutes later, and nothing from Hayes, we had decided to enter the maze of collapsed and crumbling buildings. A flare burned dimly near a building, so we decided to leave the other 2 men to stand watch outside while we went inside. "Take a look at this," I said, pointing to the runic symbols that covered every surface. We surveyed the area with caution, only for the other 2 with us to start arguing. "There's more of those Magic the Gathering looking symbols," Apollo said. "Nah, definitely belongs to Dungeons and Dragons," Nexus argued. At this point, I was just wanting to get back home, but we had a job to do, and by the time I looked back after my train of thought, I found them wrestling each other on the ground over by the runes that we had come to look at. "Would you 2 fuckwits get off each other and shut up? We have to find Hayes and finish the mission," I half yelled, as not to give our position away, but enough for them to hear me clearly. "Who are you talking to?" Lisa asked. "The 2 idiots attracting unwanted attention," I snapped. "Marcus, they're out front, where you wanted them." My blood ran cold as I suddenly came back to it. I ordered Nexus and Apollo to stand watch outside the building complex while we went inside to look for Hayes. The radio suddenly crackled to life. "I found a back entrance to the building since it's starting to rain out here. I can barely hear you over the static." Hayes' voice chirped through the radio. "Permission to enter, sir?" Hayes asked, his voice trembling. "Granted. Enter cautiously and keep your eyes peeled. This is now a retrieval and extraction," I replied, my voice a lifeline in the dark. "I'm walking up to the building's back entrance now when I see something. Wait, it looks like hooded figures up ahead." His voice cut out mid-sentence as he presumably entered the building. "Shit," I said aloud and started jogging in the direction of the back entrance, hoping to get to a possibly hurt Hayes along with Lisa following me in pursuit. "Stay calm, Ryan. We're coming to get you," I replied, my voice strained with determination. As our reconnaissance team Delta rapidly approached the flare's back exit, we noticed a slight electricity in the air as our hair stood on end. When we first stepped foot into the building's back entrance, it was almost as if we had been put straight into a humid freezer, the kind you'd find at Uncle Mickey's house, and boy, it was freezing. The second thing we noticed was Hayes' rifle, empty. This made no sense, as we'd heard 0 gunfire moments before. Me and Lisa were confused, but we had to move and make the extraction successful. "Apollo, Nexus, report in," I said over the radio, but I got nothing but a buzzing, crackling sound in return. "Signal must be weak," I muttered. Me and Lisa traversed the building's interior, our steel-toe boots hitting the wet floor. There was a tension in the air, and I knew why. Lisa doubted my ability to lead us. I swear I caught her eyeing me a few times. As we continued our imperial march down the hallway, we had encountered the dog tags of our boy Hayes. Not a good sign in all this. "Hayes, come in. Are you injured?" Nothing, just static. But a slight slur came out of the radio, like someone trying to speak for the first time. "Hayes, Nexus, Apollo, is that you? Come in." To our horror, the room we ended up walking into while distracted by the radio was, well, there's no good way to put it. It was filled with bones of all sizes. Some ranged from carrot size, while some ranged from the size of an oversized frying pan. "Holy crap," Lisa muttered under her breath. "This wasn't on any of the intel we had." She was right. Nothing could have prepared us for this. The radio crackled to life. "Turn around." We immediately swung around towards the door, and I'm not sure how, nor do I really care, but there was Apollo. I looked at Lisa, and she shot me a look of approval. She saw him, too. "Told you to stay outside," I said. "Sorry, our position was compromised, and we had to get the hell out of there," he explained. Where is your great dungeon master buddy Nexus?" I asked, with a touch of annoyance. "I don't know. We ran in 2 different directions," he said. They could have got him for all I know." That was when I noticed it. It was slight, and any average person would have missed it. His eyes. I was shining my flashlight straight in his face, yet I saw no reflection in his eyes. First I chalked it up to delusion, but the more I examined his physical appearance, the more irregularities I saw. His hair was slightly darker, his skin paler than usual. He seemed taller at one point. The teeth, when he showed a grateful grin, looked irregularly sharp, almost dagger-like. It appeared that Lisa hadn't seen what I was seeing, because she gave him a firm handshake as they set off to find Hayes and Nexus. He also had a tinge of blood smeared on the toe of his steel-toed boot. As they left the room, I trailed behind, making sure to keep an eye on Apollo. "Hello," a familiar voice said over the radio. Ryan sounded off. I didn't know how to describe it. He prolonged every word he said as if he were unsure that was the word he wanted to use. "Ryan, is that you?" I asked. "Yes," he responded. "Tell us where you are. We need landmarkers." "Go past," he said. "Can you repeat that?" I asked, but there was silence. It was as if he were choosing his next words very carefully. "Ryan, we need you to be more specific on your coordinates," I ordered in a stern, monotone voice. When he didn't respond, I ordered Lisa and Apollo to follow me deeper into the building that we had entered. I was trying to rationalize it by telling myself Hayes was probably slurring his speech due to the fact it was super cold and he could have hypothermia. Is it just me, or is it getting colder the further we go into this crumbling building? Lisa said, to no one in particular. "Can I get a minute to collect myself?" I said to the old agents that were collecting my memories like bees on a flower. They nodded and took a sip of water as they sat on the metal table in the room we lingered in. After half a minute, I continued my account. We had rounded the corner, and we saw a figure just standing there in a dark hallway. It nerved the hell out of me, since it stood like a statue and as quiet as an asylum chamber. By the look of it, the figure had a uniform the same as the one we were wearing, which seemed odd. "Is that you, Hayes?" I called out towards the unmoving figure. It didn't respond, didn't move an inch to the sound of my command. Just as a precaution, I ordered the others to check their ammunition and point it forward just in case it got messy. And just then I noticed Apollo didn't have his rifle, which greatly confused me. "Apollo, where's your rifle?" I ordered. "I lost it in the scramble me and Nexus had earlier when the terrorists ambushed us, whilst waiting outside as you ordered us to," he replied, looking pale as he probably recounted it in his head. I gave him an angry stare, but shot my gaze back at the still unmoving figure. I held my hand up to tell Lisa and Apollo to stay put as I slowly closed the distance between me and it. As I came within a few feet of it, I poked the figure in the back with the tip of my rifle. It promptly fell over with a deafening, dull thud. "Holy Jesus on a skateboard!" I half yelled when I realized it was Nexus's uniform with his dog tags around the mannequin's neck. It was a mannequin, which scared the shit out of me and the others. How in the hell did this uniform and all get on a mannequin that just so happened to perfectly fit its clothes? This shit show was already making no sense, but now I felt like this was a low-budget nightmare. "They must have got him and done this as a sick joke to toy with us," Apollo said in a shaky voice. "We don't know that, but it is indeed a grim possibility. We got to remain on point and hope for the best, even though this job is never always about happy endings," I told them, sadness in my tone. We started checking and sweeping every room we came across, only to find nothing but dust and static on the radio, until we either heard a response on the radio or we came across any of our lost teammates. About 12 rooms down the hallway, we found a door slightly ajar, which we found all the others shut tight. I halted the unit and made a hand signal to proceed with guns drawn into the room. 3, 2, 1, I counted down quietly. When I hit 0, we entered the room with a slight pace in our stealthy entrance. To this very day, I wish we had left that room alone, but we had a job to do. What we found was Nexus. Well, what was left of him. You could barely call it a human. The mangled remains of Nexus lay sprawled amidst the surrounding rubble, an art piece of carnage. His form resembled a pulpy chaos, with flesh torn into ribbons and organs strewn about as though crafted by a butcher catering exclusively to Bundy and Dahmer themselves. Limbs were twisted at an unnatural angle, bones protruding through torn skin like jagged spears. Chunks of flesh had been ripped away, leaving gaping wounds that oozed crimson onto the ruined floor. His face contorted in betrayal. He was barely recognizable beneath the mass of ripped tendons and muscles. Eyes stared listlessly, wide with terror, while lips peeled back in a silent scream, revealing broken teeth protruding from the back of his throat and neck, as well as partially, and having his own tongue bitten off, hanging out of his mouth like a dog with its head out a car window. A rusty piece of rebar was protruding from the back of his head and out through where his left eye should have been. It was a scene of unimaginable horror, a testament to the merciless brutality of whoever had done this to Lieutenant Gabriel Nexus. And as we stood amidst the carnage, the realization dawned upon us that, in the darkness of the crumbling labyrinth, something merciless lurked. Its bloodlust insatiable, and its thirst for harm unquenchable. "We need to get the hell out of here," I said out loud. Apollo and I shared the same unspoken thought, a lingering question that danced on the edge of our minds, until Lisa voiced it out loud, cutting through the tension. "Do we radio home base and request the dreadnoughts? Even if we do, which we should, I doubt they'd send them. It's not disastrous enough for them to intervene. Plus, those guys out there are just muscle. They'll shred everything they see," I replied, my confidence tinged with uncertainty. "It's worth a shot. Otherwise, we can always just bail in the armored truck we arrived in," Apollo said. "We'll be toast if we bail, whether or not the base agrees," I countered, my voice edged with a sneer. I thought over our options, and it became clear that there were no good choices. Stay and risk further danger, or call for the extraction and face potential consequences. Calling in the dreadnoughts wasn't viable either, as they were essentially a last resort. "Unit Delta to base, do you copy?" I asked sternly into the receiver. "Base to Delta, copy. What's the situation?" the man on the other end asked, with curiosity and professionalism. "Delta unit to base, we've got a KIA and an MIA. Multiple hostages surrounding the compound. Request immediate backup," I conveyed, a hint of panic evident. When the base hadn't responded right away, worry gnawed at my mind. Had we lost connection? "Base to Delta unit, backup denied due to current situation. Be advised, we are detecting multiple signatures around the area you are located in." "Delta unit to base, roger that. We'll be on site until the threat is neutralized," I confirmed before signing off. With no backup en route, we were left to fend for ourselves. As I straightened my back, I saw Hayes limping towards us, his condition shockingly worse than I imagined. His skin drooped in some areas and stretched thin in others, a grim sight that made my skin crawl. "Hayes, is that you? Where have you been?" I asked, a mix of relief and anger in my voice. Hayes barely acknowledged my presence. His demeanor was unsettling, but before I could dwell on it, I spotted a few flashlights in the distance, coming from the group of 3 people patrolling the area. I thought to myself that I'd have to grill his brains out later when we got back to base, if we finished this mission alive. I was about to brief the team on our next move when I realized that Hayes was missing again. Alarm bells rang in my mind. Hadn't I just seen him a moment ago? "Did anyone notice Hayes?" I asked, a chill creeping up my spine. "Yeah, he said something about scouting a vantage point down the hill," Apollo replied. "Check on him. Make sure he's okay," I ordered, my unease growing. "That directive will haunt me forever, Agent..." "Wait, you never told me your first name," I said, addressing the agent from the FBI, ATF, or whatever damn organization he was from. "I suspect you're delaying what you must disclose, eager to return to your solitary abode and share this tale with your online acquaintances. But should you do so, I have no choice but to imprison you for violating the NDAs I'll provide once the story concludes. So refrain from inquiries and proceed," the seasoned individual growled, his voice resonating with the weight of years and authority, leaving me shaken to my core. "Apologies," I murmured. Apollo had ventured off to check up on Hayes, and I noticed a few figures tentatively crouching alongside the building, just a floor below us. Those terrorists were going to try to get the jump on our unit if we stepped a foot outside the building we were located in. "Guys have spotted 4 armed figures crouched on the east wall just a floor down from the window," I said into the radio. I saw Apollo barrel through the open doorway and nearly crash through a closed door before he could stop himself. He looked white as a ghost and out of breath, like he'd just run a full marathon. "Hey, watch what you're doing, Apollo," barked Lisa, as she had a near miss with Apollo colliding into her. "Captain, I found Hayes," he said, shakily, though his tone was barely audible. "Is he all right?" His body's gone." "What are you talking about, Apollo? He's right over there," I demanded. "His body is gone. Only his skin's there," Apollo said, his knees buckling and shaking under his weight. I hadn't realized at the time. It took me a few seconds to process what he had said. When I figured out what he meant, I bolted towards the hallway and found the room where Hayes went to find a good vantage point. When I finally found the room, I goggled at the sight in horror. Before us lay Private Hayes, or what remained of him, a ghastly mass of shredded skin draped over the cold earth. His skin, once a canvas of life, now hung in tattered shreds, a macabre tapestry stretched over a devoid room. With only his skin remaining, the flesh was shredded strips like a shedded snakeskin. Before the shredded remains, there was nothing but emptiness, a void where muscle and sinew once pulled with vitality. Now emptied by, well, nothing. Blood, thick and viscous, seeped from the shredded remains, mingling with the barely scented room in a sickening display. His face, a face of surprise and pain, bore the brunt of humanity's fury. Eyes, wide with horror, stared sightlessly into the abyss, their once vibrant hue now dulled by the chill embrace of death. Lips, torn and mangled, were frozen in a silent frown, a testament to the unspeakable damage that he had endured. Amidst all the desolation, one thing was clear. Private Hayes was beyond salvation. Apollo appeared behind me suddenly with a surprisingly calm expression. What I hadn't noticed before was that the hunting knife situated on his waistband was missing when I saw it a few minutes later. "Apollo, where's your knife?" I asked with concern. "Probably lost it in the ambush earlier," he said nervously. "You better be right about that. Don't lose weapons the terrorists can use against us." At this point, Lisa tried to look around the doorway, but we had subdued her efforts and forced her away from the room. We needed to radio base so we could leave, with or without their permission. I didn't care if I got my head booted in by my boss or not. When I came back into the room, though, I noticed tossed furniture and bloodstains leading towards the closet door. "Apollo, watch my back," I told him. I crept to the closet door, and the smell got stronger with each step. It was heavy with copper and the slight hint of decay. I stood at the door, and in one swift motion I swung open the creaky old thing, and I found the rest of Hayes inside. That's when I noticed it, a detail that turned my blood from ice to boiling hot rage. The knife protruding from his sternum, a knife with Apollo's bloodied initials on the handle. Next thing I knew, my temper exploded like Krakatoa, erupting after 1,000 years of rage. "You son of a bitch!" I screamed at him, not caring who could hear me. Before he could rifle his gun at me, I pulled my service pistol out of my holster and fired a shot that ripped through his shoulder. He managed to pull a shot off at me too, but the bullet only grazed my thigh. His agonizing yells and moans of pain echoed throughout the building, Lisa bursting into the room where I shot him, with the remains of Hayes' skin and innards still strewn around. "Marcus, put your gun down. What are you doing?" she demanded. "He killed Hayes. I saw what was left of him in that closet. Apollo's knife still in him." I thought I might be losing my mind, but the thought was pushed aside when Lisa confirmed what I saw only a few minutes ago. She looked down at the now profusely bleeding Apollo and gave him a look I could only describe as pure hate. Before I could tell her to handcuff him and not cause any more damage, she grabbed her sidearm and put one right between his eyes. "Jesus Christ, Alvarez, what did you do that for?" She didn't answer. "Let's get out of here. I just need to radio base on our next move," I said aloud. "Unit Delta to base, come in." But there was nothing but static. Guess the concrete building was blocking the radio signal, so we'd have to leave on our own accord. I peeked out the window and didn't see any hostiles around or approaching our current location. Perhaps they'd left the compound in fear of more officers being called down to take the rest of them. Let's just get out of here and back to base. I just can't stand seeing any more death tonight, Lisa told me, with desperation in her voice. We trudged down the stairs and peeked out the front entrance to find the corpses of the terrorists we had shot down. We proceeded with rifles drawn, along with swiftness that was questionable, considering that stealth would have been a good-sized priority right now. When we were about 100 yards away from the armored truck, Lisa tripped on a root that stuck out of the ground. She stumbled and fell at an awkward angle, cracking her head on one of the large rocks that dotted the area. "Shit, Lisa, are you all right?" She didn't respond, and I assumed she was either unconscious or dead from her untimely fall. Ultimately, I had to carry her 100 or so yards to the truck. When I put her in the back, I hopped into the driver's seat and noticed the keys were still in the ignition. My dumbass had left them there, and I was lucky that nobody had decided to steal our escape route. I turned the ignition, and the vehicle rumbled with steady intensity, ready to take us far, far away. "So that's my story, my adults-only fairy tale you wanted out of me, Agent," I spoke to him in an overall tired tone. "And how is Lisa holding up these days?" "She's brain dead, since the blow to her head gave her major brain damage. She'll never remember this mission, and she'll need to live in an assisted living home until the end of her days." In the end, the agent made me sign a bunch of NDAs and sent me on my way. That's my story, and I'd place some bets that the agents will be pretty pissed when they figure out that I recorded our entire conversation on my old 90s tape recorder. I'll leave you with some advice, though. Humanity will always be the apex predator to what it can conjure up against you. At least you can hide under the covers from the monsters under your bed, but when you're faced with someone with true horrific intent, all you can do is watch the fight unfold. I was just thinking about maybe popping in a movie later. Maybe sitting all snugly warm on my couch and watching something I've watched 1,000 times. And it put me in mind of our next story. I lived in that magical age of VHS tapes and blockbusters and going on Friday to rent your tape for the weekend. But I imagine it's a little different when you actually work in a place like that. You probably get your fair share of weirdos, your fair share of strange things put back in through the Dropbox. So, let's have a look at what it was like to work in a video store in the 90s. I'd worked there for 2 years and loved it. There were all kinds of deals and discounts for employees, and we had a big popcorn machine like you see in the movie theaters, free for anyone who wanted a bag. We had a large repeat customer base of regulars that always looked for recommendations, which we were thrilled to give. 2 of us would close up at the end of the night, with one typically being a guy. Yet somehow on that Sunday, it ended up being 2 girls. I was pretty tired from a bad night of sleep, and not feeling real great, so I was just trying to get to the end of the shift. My coworker, Michelle's boyfriend, came by about an hour before closing, and went through the aisles repeatedly, trying to kill time. Finally, I told her she could take off, and I'd close up by myself. It was a Sunday, so we'd be closing at 8, which was half an hour away, and the store had been quiet all day, so I wasn't expecting a big rush. A few minutes after they left, I decided to start cleaning up, which meant going around and collecting the garbage bags from all the bins around the store. The store itself was huge, with dozens of 5-foot-high rows of VHS tapes, and a large load-bearing pillar decorated with prop characters. There were TVs playing new releases of all kinds. As I walked out from behind the desk to start with the garbage bins, I heard the familiar ding sound come from the front door. It seemed we had a late customer. I went back behind the desk and put another VHS in the automatic tape rewinder. Those things were great. As the tape rewound, I tried to get a better look at who had come in, but they'd turned down the first aisle, horror, and the shelves and one of the large pillars blocked my view. I waited for them to move out from behind the pillar, but They stayed there. Then the tape popped up in the rewinder, and I let out an embarrassing gasp. I kind of winced at myself as I replaced the tape in the plastic sleeve. I set another tape to rewind and decided to start collecting the garbage near the front. When I got up to the horror aisle, the customer was gone. The store was quiet. I walked down the aisle and turned to the right where I could see down 2 more rows. There was no one. I went down another row and walked out to the main aisle leading to the desk and came face to face with the customer. He was a man in his mid-20s, about 6 feet tall. He had long jet black hair and was dressed all in black. He had on a dirty leather jacket and wore chains with pentagrams and goat skulls. The Satanist look wasn't exactly intimidating back then, as it kind of blended in with the punk crowd in the area. I couldn't tell which side this guy was on, but there was something behind his eyes that made me feel cold. He stared at me, long and hard. It was the most uncomfortable I'd ever been. Neither of us spoke, and for a moment, I thought he was going to rush me. Then the tape rewinder popped up and killed the tension. I let out a nervous laugh, and he smiled at me like he'd known me my whole life. "Good evening," he said, and walked past me. I croaked out, "You too," as I heard the front door open and close in that familiar jingle. I turned and saw the man outside, walking off towards his car at the far end of the parking lot. It was 7:45, so I decided to shut the store down early. The man left a lasting impression, and I called my boyfriend and told him to be there at 8 to pick me up. I locked the front door and felt a lot better. I picked up all the garbage and put it away. Then I went back to the front desk to empty the till, and that's when I saw something on the counter. It was a VHS tape in a plastic container. The man must have returned it. Only, it wasn't one of ours. It had the same kind of clear plastic holder we used, but it didn't have a sleeve or a jacket from our store. The tape inside it had a sticker on it with a name written on it. It said, "Melissa." That's my name. The tape wasn't rewound. It was as far to the right as it could get, like it had been watched to the very end. My hands were shaking, but I managed to put the tape in the rewinder. It was an automatic reaction. I wasn't even sure I wanted to watch the tape. As it rewound, I argued with myself over what to do. I thought about not watching it, but knew it would eat away at me if I didn't. I thought about waiting for my boyfriend and watching it with him, but he was a hothead, and if it was something bad, I could see him going postal. I decided to watch it by myself in the back office. My finger had hovered over the play button, but eventually I pressed it. The tape started with static, then an image took over. It was a grainy handheld camera, held by someone in the driver's seat of a car that was moving. The holder of the camera was trying to keep it steady while they drove. After several seconds, the available hand turned the steering wheel, and I caught a glimpse of something out of the windshield that I recognized. It was the glowing sign above our store, South Coast Videos, in neon. I watched the car pull into the back end of the parking lot, right where the man had been going earlier. The camera pointed at the front entrance of the video store and waited. A family car entered the parking lot. My boyfriend. It pulled up in front of the store, and I watched myself kiss him as I got in. The video cut to footage from a new day and another work drop-off, this time by my parents. It showed another and another, over a dozen cuts of me getting out of the car and going into the store. Then the video showed me coming out, going into whichever car was picking me up that night and driving off. In the video, I recognized the pants I was wearing from the previous day and realized I was watching footage from last night. I watched myself get into my parents' car and drive away. This time, the camera followed. The driver was tailing us, and it stuck with us all the way home. I watched my parents' car pull into our driveway. The camera focused on our house, number 42, and then cut to black. For a moment I thought that was it. But the tape had more. A new image flickered on. It said it was just after 3 a.m. It was from inside the car again, and it was pointing at my house. The driver's side door opened and the camera got out. It moved across the street and towards the side of the house. The camera pointed in through the window along the side as it moved towards the backyard. I saw the living room, the dining room. They were both dark and empty. At the back door, there was a fumbling and jangling before a small metal tool was brought out and jammed into the lock. It was twisted, and the door popped open. My heart went from beating 1,000,000 times per second to not at all. The man was inside my house. The camera switched to the grainy night vision and moved through the empty kitchen and entered the living room and looked at photos hanging on the walls and books stacked on the shelves. It took the whole room in. Then it turned to the staircase that led up to the bedroom. The camera moved up the stairs quietly and reached the second floor. I pressed stop on the VCR. I wasn't sure I wanted to continue. I reconsidered getting my boyfriend and asking him to watch and tell me what had happened. But I had to know. I pressed play. The tape began with the camera looking left, then right down the hallway. I knew that to the right was my younger brother and sister's room, and to the left was the bathroom, my parents' room, and mine at the far end. The camera started left, focusing on the door at the end of the hallway, my door. The camera moved past the bathroom and my parents' room without slowing. It came to stop on my door. A hand reached out and turned the knob. It opened a crack, and a hand slipped in further, bringing the camera with it. My bedroom door closed with the man on the inside. The camera found my bed, and there I was, sound asleep. My thumb hovered over the stop button on the VCR, ready to end whatever it was about to see before it traumatized me for life. The camera was placed on my desk, facing the bed. The man from the store came into view. He carried a rag in his hand. I watched him creep up onto the bed, easing himself across it until he was over the top of me. Then he pressed the rag down over my face. My body trembled and shook and then went still. I pressed stop and threw up in the garbage bin beside the TV. Watching the attack, I'd gotten a horrible, familiar feeling, like a forgotten memory reappearing after being lost. I took a few minutes, collecting myself, before deciding once again that whatever happened to me on that tape, I needed to know. I pressed play again, and there was the image of my unconscious body in my bed, being straddled by a black-clothed goth psychopath. The man pulled the rag away from my face. He pulled my shirt up over my head, then reached around to the back of his pants. He pulled out a knife with a ceremonial handle and dragged it down the center of my chest without drawing a drop of blood. Then he put the blade to the palm of his left hand and cut. He winced at the pain, but then resheathed the knife and dabbed his right finger and the blood of his palm. The man used the blood to draw all over my stomach and chest. He made strange markings on my skin, taking his time while he did so. Then he finished and lit a candle. He held it with his right hand and put his bloody left hand on my stomach. I could hear him on the tape, speaking quietly, but couldn't make out what he was saying. It sounded like hushed chanting or praying. As he went on, my back began to arch upward and lift off the bed. My mouth opened and I held one long, continuous gasp for what felt like minutes. Then the man stopped, and so did my gasp. I fell limply back to the bed, and the candle blew out. After a moment, the man got up and cleaned the blood off my stomach, using a towel he'd brought. He grabbed the camera from the desk and crept out of my room. Everything went hazy after that. I'd sweated through all my clothes, my whole body trembling, but I still watched the camera sneak back out my house and to his car. The video pulled something back in my memories, a strange, frightening disturbance in the night. Only brief flashes and lengths and dismissed as a bad dream. But I had a horrible migraine when I woke up. It all made sense. I showed the video to my boyfriend and he freaked out. We called the police and gave them every bit of evidence there was. But the man was never found. That was years ago, and the only reason I'm thinking about it now is because I'm pregnant. There are strange markings appearing on my growing belly that look a lot like the ones the man drew in his own blood. Sometimes it seems like the day just slips away from me while I sit here and share all these great stories with you. Sometimes it feels like my whole life slips by, and what a wonderful way to spend a life in sitting here with you, sharing great stories and great times. We've all heard of Disney, haven't we? Unless you've been living in a rock in the middle of the woods, I should think you have. We've all heard about the parks, even if we haven't been to them. And you've probably stumbled across the weird things that happen there. Strange incidents in the underground tunnels, ghosts on the property. Strange things that happen not just at night, but under the light of day, too. So, let's explore one of Disney's dark secrets, shall we? Teddy and I had been working at Disney for years. The two of us had seen hundreds, if not thousands, of young cast members come and go, heading off to college or to better jobs and brighter futures. Meanwhile, the two of us stuck around and became a running joke to some of the younger employees, since we were never promoted to management, that is. Most of the lower-level members were young, in their early 20s or late teens, and to them, it was just a part-time gig, a way to raise money for college or to pass a bit of time until their real lives and careers began. But Teddy and I were lifers, and some would say losers, although I would never attach that label to myself willingly. I'd heard it whispered enough times to know that it was what other people thought of us. We'd both been there for nearly 2 decades, and had worked on pretty much every single attraction, but had never been deemed responsible enough to be promoted to supervisor status. Over all that time, I found a lot of secrets about the place. Some things that are known to the public, but also some revelations that aren't talked about anywhere. Did you know that cast members who work as mascots have to wear communal underwear? Yeah, that's right. They all share the same underoos, and they get washed in between uses. At least, in theory. Who knows what pervert came up with that idea? Or how about the fact the skeleton on the Pirates of the Caribbean ride was originally constructed out of real bones? Despite the park's insistence that all the bones were removed, a few still remain. Management lost track of which were real and which were fake, and they just left the real ones in there along with the imposters. But when you're up close, it's easy to tell them apart. The real ones are a little more yellow, and they're heavier than the plaster ones. There are plenty of morbid secrets like that. People scatter the ashes of their deceased loved ones in the park so frequently, we actually have a not-so-subtle code name for it, a white powder alert. The Haunted Mansion and the Pirates of the Caribbean are the most common places, but it's done all over, and who knows how often people get away with it without even being noticed. Code 101 means a ride is temporarily shut down, while Code V, or a protein spill, means that someone has vomited on a ride and it needs to be cleaned up. Those spills are often the cause of ride shutdowns, rather than mechanical issues. Oh, and if you hear yourself or someone else being referred to as a treasured guest, it doesn't mean you're a VIP. It's actually our code word for saying you're being an asshole. There are stories of ghosts, some told by people who never believed in such things before witnessing them in the park. The specter of Walt Disney himself has been seen a couple of times, outside Sleeping Beauty's castle, just on the other side of the drawbridge. Or, sometimes, he's seen at night, just outside his old apartment on Main Street, where occasionally you might smell a whiff of cigarette smoke, despite the fact that such things are banned inside the park. Walt and his family once lived there, so they could spy on visitors and listen to their opinion on the park. They would eavesdrop on their conversations from the second-floor apartment, just above the street level. George, a dead electrician, supposedly haunts the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and every morning, cast members must call out, "Good morning, George," at the start of the day. Otherwise, the ride will mysteriously have issues all day long. Unexpected shutdowns and other strange things often occur if George isn't given his proper morning greeting. And have you heard about the animatronics in It's a Small World running all night long? Yep, those rumors are true too. In fact, quite a few of the lifelike robots stay in motion 24/7, even throughout the lockdown and park shutdowns a couple of years back. If you ask the management about it, they'll tell you it's because the attractions are cheaper to maintain that way. They break down less frequently if they're in constant motion. That's the excuse we get anyway. But I've come to realize there might be far more terrifying reasons for this. Something so disturbing and twisted that I wouldn't have thought it was possible if I hadn't witnessed it for myself. Teddy and I were on our lunch break when we found the storage room. We were looking for somewhere a little more private since Teddy had brought a bit of homemade greenery and his favorite piece of glassware that day. The park has miles and miles of tunnels crisscrossing beneath it, and Teddy and I had explored most of the labyrinth over our years of service. Like everything else in the park, there was a stupid nickname for these underground tunnels. They had been dubbed utilidors by some management types in the distant past. Most of the cast members just called them the tunnels, and they were so vast we often used golf carts to get from one end of them to the other. There were odd dead ends at some of the tunnels that seemed to intentionally lead to nowhere. We were currently in one such useless utilidor when we noticed an odd-looking door which appeared to be at least half a century old, if not more. It had a rusted placard hanging over its surface which read, "Obsolete animatronic storage." "Hey, didn't there used to be a vending machine there?" Teddy asked. "Who cares? Let's see if it opens. We've only got 20 minutes left," I said, looking at the time on my cell phone. The doorknob turned in my hand, and the two of us went inside. I looked for a light switch on the wall to my right, but I didn't find one. It was pitch black and impossible to see anything. Using the flashlight on my phone, I cast a beam of light around the room, trying to see what kind of space we were in. There were people-shaped forms all around us, draped in tarps and tablecloths. The room was as long as a football field, but it was narrow, only about 15 feet across. "Creepy," Teddy said, taking the words right out of my mouth. Well, I guess it did say this was animatronic storage. This must be really old. He wandered away from the door, and it clicked shut behind him. Something about that made me nervous, but I had ignored the feeling. The door had been unlocked, and that meant we'd be able to get out again. Still, I reached for the knob to check it. My hand was about to touch the polished brass when Teddy called out, making me jump. "Whoa! Check this out!" he said, sounding excited. I left the door, turning around to see what he was looking at. He had his cell phone light on as well, and was lifting up one of the tarps to look at what was underneath. "Man, this thing's freaky looking." He pulled the tarp away, and I saw what he meant. The thing hidden beneath was very creepy. It had the goateed face of a young man, but the ears and nubby horns of a goat, looking far too real. Its lower half looked like it also belonged to a goat. The thing reminded me of a satyr, those drunken, lustful half-goat gods from Greek mythology. I tried to figure out why it was making me feel so uneasy, and realized it was the eyes. They were too lifelike, far more real than the animatronics out in the park, and the look of the skin, the way it reflected the light and anything about it, it looked like it was a real creature. More likely, a man had been sewn to the body of a goat in a very thorough way, making the seams blend together perfectly. Teddy was already moving on to the next one, looking under another tarp. He left me alone with this one, and I looked back down at it as I let go of the cover and let it fall across its face again. Flinching backwards, I nearly screamed, as I could have sworn the eyes of the thing were looking at me, just as I dropped the tarp over its face. My heart was beating fast, and I tried to tell myself it was just a trick of the light, or that the eyes had been looking up that way the whole time, and I just hadn't noticed. "We need to go," I heard myself say, but Teddy wasn't listening. "Holy crap, this one's even more jacked up. Dude, you gotta check this out." I opened my mouth to say, "No, let's get out of here," but my words caught in my throat. The satyr creature under the tarp was clearly moving now. Its head was still draped in the plastic sheet, but I could see it turning to look at me, as if its gaze could penetrate through the tarp. "Dude, come check this out," Teddy was yelling, pulling the next sheet off and dropping it to the floor. I saw what he was referring to, my eyes drawn to it despite the terror of the draped creature just in front of me. This one was tall, standing nearly 10 feet. It had one large eye instead of two. Man, whoever made these things was tripping on acid or something. Look at this thing. It looks like they jacked an eye from an elephant and stuffed it in some dude's forehead. I think they were trying to make a cyclops. I could barely hear him, as now the thing in front of me wasn't the only figure in the room which was moving. To my left, the entire row of covered forms were beginning to stretch and turn as they woke up from whatever sleep they had been in. Some were tall, some were short, like the satyr thing on my right, but all of them were alive. I realized it was very cold all of a sudden, and realized I could see my breath steaming out in the air. A compressor groaned to life, and I saw a nearby vent cough out a frosty plume as if something had been jammed or broken and was suddenly operating again. The temperature in the room began to plummet, and a second later, I was freezing cold, the rushing air chilling the back of my neck. Finally, I was shocked out of my stupor and managed to get a word out. "Teddy," I croaked, but too late. The giant cyclops hand shot out and grabbed my friend by the throat. It lifted him up into the air while his legs kicked and his arms thrashed, trying to break its grip. He was choking and sputtering, flailing madly as he tried to free himself. The cyclops firmly held him by the throat, and I heard the sound of cartilage and bones being crushed. His spine popped, and his head bent back at an impossible angle, his skull lolling backwards like a broken Pez dispenser. And then the giant dropped him to the concrete floor of the room, and his phone clattered and turned over, casting half the room in darkness again. I backed away, feeling like I was moving in slow motion, but unable to go any quicker. Reaching back for the doorknob, it felt like the tunnel had grown by 100 feet. It was further away than it could possibly have ever been. I kept backing up, taking slow, quiet steps. The figures were moving towards me, all of them closing the gap and slowly walking in my direction. Their forms were covered, draped in bed sheets and tarps and tablecloths, as if this place had been thrown together in a hurry, hastily constructed to house these possessed animatronics or whatever these creatures were. Cold air was filling the room, making it even more difficult to move. My skin felt like it was being stabbed with pins and needles, the freezing wind going right through my summer clothes. There was a sound of tearing flesh and blood being spilled. I looked to see several of the monsters were tearing the skin from Teddy's face, peeling it from his bones with some difficulty, like trying to open an underripe orange. The worst part was, it looked like he was still alive. He was opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water, his eyes wide open as if he'd be screaming if he were capable of it. I tried to tear my eyes away from it, but I couldn't. I found myself staring at him as they took the flesh off his face. I backed up hard into something and realized it was the door. In the darkness, I felt for the doorknob behind me, but I couldn't find it. The creatures were still moving towards me, all of their faces covered by sheets except for the massive cyclops that had killed my friend. Its one huge eye was fixed on me, and as it moved in lockstep with the other creatures, they all seemed to share one hive mind. As they approached, a few stepped on each other's coverings, tearing them away and revealing their hideous faces. I saw a woman's upper body sewn onto the legs of a deer, and a man with the hindquarters of a bull, their faces full of mute anger. My hand groped for the doorknob desperately, and after several long moments, it settled on the smooth brass. It was so cold, almost frozen. I spun around, expecting the doorknob to turn easily, but this time it was stuck. I couldn't tell if it was locked or frozen solid, but either way it wouldn't budge. Feeling like there would be icy hands around my throat at any second, I was too terrified to turn around. I heard the sound of shuffling feet moving closer, the icy wind blowing through my clothes and raising goosebumps on my skin. I began pounding against the door with my fists, banging on it as hard as I could as I screamed for help, pleading for someone to save me. "Help! Help! Open the door!" I yelled at the top of my lungs. The corridor we had entered was a dead end, rarely used by anyone. Of course, this door would be locked from the inside, I thought to myself. Who would offer an escape to these animatronic demons? If they had ever been imbued with any form of failsafe, it was long ago out of commission and useless. These creatures had no mercy and no respect for human life. They wanted blood and flesh and meat to create more of themselves, to raise an army of undead robotic soldiers. Manic thoughts were racing through my head as I tried to think of another way out. There had to be something, some other way out. I turned around, hoping for some other exit to present itself, but instead I just saw hundreds of shrouded forms stepping closer and closer until they were just a few feet away. A gurgling, wheezing sound could be heard from behind them, and I realized it was the labored breathing of Teddy slowly dying. If I didn't get out of here, I'd be next. With one desperate move, I kicked out towards the head of the nearest shrouded figure. It was the satyr. My foot connected with his face, and as it did, the entire crowd fell back a step, as if hurting one of them would hurt all of them. I lashed out with another blow, punching it in the gut, and the crowd took another wounded step backward. I used the newfound space to my advantage and took a short running start towards the door. Kicking it hard with my boot, I connected squarely with the spot beyond the doorknob. It rattled in the frame, but it didn't budge. Taking a quick look back over my shoulder, I saw the crowd of animatronic creatures were coming at me again with renewed anger. They looked furious at me for assaulting one of them, and apparently I had injured it. The satyr was slumped forward, its joints making creaky noises as it made its way towards me, its movements jerky and disorganized. I kicked the door again, harder this time, using every ounce of force I could muster. I heard something splinter and break, but it still wouldn't budge. Icy hands grabbed my throat from behind, and I threw an elbow backward to try to break free. It connected with whatever had grabbed me, and it didn't let go. Instead, its grip tightened, choking and squeezing my throat until I couldn't breathe. I let out another strangled cry for help, but no sound came out this time. The grip on my windpipe was making it impossible to call out. My feet were going numb from the cold, which seemed to have intensified even more somehow. I hadn't thought it was possible to feel any colder, but I realized that whoever was controlling the temperature of this place was doing this on purpose. These things didn't like the cold, and it put them in a state of hibernation. For some reason, this place had been almost room temperature when we entered, bringing these creatures back to life. With one more desperate effort, I lifted my leg and kicked as hard as I could, my heel connecting with the door just beside the latch. Something shattered and broke loudly, and the door swung open on its hinges. The momentum brought me forward, and I found myself tumbling back into the corridor. Whatever had grabbed hold of me came with me, the icy hand still around my neck. As I landed, the thing's fingers broke off like icicles, shattering on impact. The shrouded creature was writhing on the floor, looking as if it wanted to get up and chase me, but wasn't quite capable of it yet. It was still too cold. I stumbled to my feet and ran from there, not really thinking about my mistake until I was far past that point. When it occurred to me what I had done, it was too late. I had let those things out. I'd opened the door and freed them, and I had allowed the warm air inside so they could come back to life and escape. I was too terrified to stay in the park. I went home immediately without saying a word to anyone, then called my boss and told him I was sick with a stomach flu. I apologized, saying I'd been throwing up in the bathroom and didn't want to cause a code V while on stage. He told me that was okay, since he knew I was a dedicated employee, trusted cast member who had been with the park for years. But he did ask if I'd seen Teddy, and I had to lie and tell him I hadn't. Supposed to go back to work tomorrow, for the first time since all of this happened. The worst part about it, nobody has reported Teddy missing. His family hadn't called to say anything either. It's almost like none of it ever happened. Except I've got the marks around my neck, the bruises that prove I didn't imagine it. I just got a strange message from Teddy on his cell phone. He says, "See you at work tomorrow, buddy," accompanied by a mouse emoji. Me and some of the cast members have a big surprise for you. Storm's really going out there today. I think, though, we've got time for one more story before I go have myself a nap. I always suggest a good nap in the middle of the day. It really prepares you to stay up all night listening to spooky stories from yours truly. We've all had our childhood fears. Fear of the dark, fear of animals or spiders, maybe a fear of what lurks in the basement. So today's story is going to take us to a place and make us face those fears as we descend into a dark place. "Are you really that afraid of the basement?" my boyfriend asked, almost casually, putting on his button-up shirt. I glared back at him. "You're seriously going to bring this up now? I'm getting ready for brunch," I said grumpily, pulling on my bra. He shrugged apologetically. "Look, I'm sorry, okay? I just want to know why. Especially if it's such a big issue. We can talk about it whenever you want, but I'd really like to talk about it eventually." His tone was calm, filled with sincere concern. I sighed. I felt my annoyance slip. I'd been avoiding the subject for so long. I really didn't want to bring it up, but Timothy had been so great. We'd been living together for over a year now, and he'd been very patient with me and my phobia of dark places. I don't just mean I'm afraid of the dark. I mean I go into full-on panic attack mode and start tearing up the walls with my bare hands and fingernails and teeth if I even get closed into a dark place. It makes going out at night or doing anything normal, like going to the cinema or the planetarium or a bar or a club, very difficult. I have a nightlight in every room in my apartment, and so plenty of backups, plus the flashlights, the candles, the lighter, pound of fresh batteries of all sizes. Of course, my smartphone can also function as a flashlight. I could go on, but suffice to say, I'm surrounded by as much light as possible. This was also why we were meeting Tim's parents for brunch in broad daylight, and not for dinner. Never dinner. I didn't leave the house once it got too close to sunset. I mostly drive wherever I need to go. Taking public transport is too risky, and I don't travel very much or very far. I also can't go into a bathroom that has no natural light and nothing but motion sensor-based lights. If they go out for just a few seconds, my heart races, my blood boils from fear, and my lungs burn with panic. I scream and run, crying usually until I'm back in the light. I'm very lucky to have Tim around. Unlike my previous boyfriends, he never made snide remarks about my phobia, even when it disrupts his schedule. His effortless patience was a stark contrast to my previous relationships. I'd never seen him so much as raise his voice. I slowly sat on the edge of the bed. "Okay, I'll tell you why. Right now, actually, if you'd like. I'd rather just spit it out. We have a few minutes, and it's not a very long story anyway. Timothy quickly pulled on his sock and came to sit next to me. I looked at him and then looked back down at the bed. I've never told this to anybody, but the reason I'm so afraid of the dark, of being alone, is because of what happened to me in the basement when I was 10 years old. I paused, and Tim took my hand. His fingers were rough and warm. I'd never had issues with the dark or the basement or anything like that before. One day my mom asked me to go down and fetch the laundry from the dryer. So I've been down in the basement of this house a billion times and think nothing of it at all. The door creaks loudly, just like normal as I open it. I lazily walk down the steps and was busy messing around with my new Walkman when I suddenly heard the door slam shut behind me. I yelled and was plunged into darkness, so pure I thought I'd gone blind. I groped in the dark for the light switch. I heard it click as the light bulb buzzed to life noisily. As I spoke, I could feel my heart begin to accelerate. I could picture that basement now, that bare light bulb. My hand shook. Tim noticed this and began to caress my hands comfortingly. I continued. The basement wasn't that big or fancy. Nothing but bare concrete. We used it to store some old furniture and photo albums. Of course, we kept our laundry down there, too. I was a bit spooked by the door slamming, so I decided to get the chore over with fast. However, as my bare foot left the last step and touched the cold concrete floor, the light bulb glowed. It glowed so brightly that it burst. I screamed from fright, and I was plunged into darkness again. It was so quiet that the distant sound of my parents or brother now extinguished. All I could hear was my own breathing. I paused again to catch my breath. It's been a long time since I told this story. All the memories that came with it filled me with terror. I moved in the direction of the laundry. I waved my hands in front of my face, but I couldn't see anything. I knew that there was a flashlight in the drawer of the desk next to the dryer. I took a few tentative steps, expecting any minute that I would feel bright pain as it exploded through my hip as I bumped into the desk. I never did, so I started taking bigger steps. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I realized that something was horribly wrong. I should have been on the other side of the room by now. A few steps after that, I should have been on the other side of the wall. Before I knew it, I was running. No, I was sprinting. I was hoping to be lucky enough to slam hard into the wall. It would prove my nightmare was a fake, but the wall never came. I ran through cold darkness. Then I heard a voice. Soft whisper. It was the voice of a man. There's nothing abnormal about his voice at all, but it gave me goosebumps. He warned me. He warned me never to return to the dark. He warned me to never tell anyone. My lips trembled, but I continued, my voice shaky. By then, I was beyond fear and incredulity. How could this be possible? Where was I? I yelped and shielded my eyes because it was suddenly blindingly bright, and I felt really cramped, like the room had just shrunk. Then strong hands were grabbing me and lifting me. I found myself being pulled from the wall. Tim's eyebrows shot up into his hairline at this point, but he remained quiet. We still have no idea how, but some men had heard a noise, and once they'd seen me, they rescued me immediately. They found me in a well that was hundreds of miles from my house, from that damn basement. I paused again, rubbing my temples with the tips of my fingers. I had to go to therapy, and no one could ever explain anything. Like I said before, I never mentioned what really happened to anyone. I didn't know whether I was more afraid of people thinking I was crazy, or if I was really more afraid of that a voice. All I said was that I blacked out on my way downstairs. The therapist said I may have gone into a fugue state or something. Basically means that they don't have a goddamn clue what the hell happened to me. I continued to go to therapy for years and years, but it never helped. I felt I could never tell anyone the truth. Anyway, it all ended up in the papers, and my family and I had to move to a whole new town. After that, it was just kind of swept under the rug. People stopped asking questions. My parents never bring it up. They pretend it didn't happen. I like to do that too. So now that I've told you, I don't want to hear another word about it. If you tease me or prank me, so help me God, I'll dump your ass. I was trying to make a joke to help break the tension, but I could feel myself shaking more and more as I recounted the story. It had been some time since I'd thought about that traumatizing day. I felt tears from the corners of my eyes, but quickly blinked them away. Tim sat silently, his expression one of sympathy and concern. Wow, I had no idea. It sounds really horrifying. I completely understand your fear now. I'm feeling a bit less fond of the dark myself. He kissed me lightly on the forehead and rubbed my arm. I looked at him in disbelief. You don't think I'm crazy? You believe me? He smiled warmly. Of course I do. I can totally believe this universe is full of strange, unexplainable, sometimes horrifying things. He paused and looked me in the eye. But are you still okay for brunch with my folks? We can always reschedule, get McDonald's, watch some DuckTales or something. I smiled at him and chuckled. It's tempting, but no. We've booked a table and everything. Besides, it's too short notice now to cancel. Let's get going, okay? I feel okay. It was a long time ago. Tim glanced at me in a way that showed he was wholly unconvinced, but he yielded. All right, my dear. I'll just take the trash down quickly. Meet you downstairs. A few minutes later, I had my makeup on and was waiting downstairs on the ground floor. Tim had left ahead of me to take the trash to the refuse bin in the basement, and I'd expected him to be waiting for me already. But he wasn't there. I frowned, confused. Was he still downstairs? Why was he taking so long? I tried to keep my panic in check, but as the minutes ticked by, my heart began to thump loudly. No. There's no such thing as the dark place. There's no such thing as the monster in the basement. I stammered to myself softly as I tried to force the panic back down into the recesses of my stomach. He's I couldn't end that thought. What if by telling him the truth I put him in danger? The voice had said not to tell anyone. I thought that it would only be angry at me. But now, I'm starting to think otherwise. My blood was electrified with terror as I took a small step towards the stairs. The stairway was curved so that the door was hidden. I cranked my neck and peered around the corner. The large metal basement door was shut. Tim, is everything okay? My voice shook slightly as I spoke, but it was firm and loud. Silence pressed against my ears. I pulled my phone out of my bag. At the tap of a button, a small but bright flashlight switched on and illuminated the hallway. I turned the flashlight towards the stairs. With shaking hands, I took a step forward, started to descend. I halted after 3 steps. I felt dizzy now. Tim, this isn't funny. I'm really freaking... Then I heard him. Kara, I tripped and hit my head. I heard him groan in pain. I think I twisted my ankle. I really need some help. My fear instantly dissipated. Tim was hurt badly. His voice sounded really worried. If he'd been unconscious this whole time, he'd need serious medical attention. Shit, why had I waited so long to go check on him? Of course, there was no such thing as monsters. I hurried down the basement stairs and grabbed the door handle. As I pulled it open, complete, utter darkness pressed up against my eyes. I felt an unnatural coldness in the air. The basement door swung back and slammed into me so hard I felt myself fly through the air. I hit the ground hard and yelled with pain and surprise. The impact knocked my phone out of my hand, and I heard it smash off as the light went out. "What the hell?" I stammered, my head swimming with confusion. Timothy," I whispered into the pure darkness. I was sitting on the hard, damp floor, which was the only other thing I could sense, besides the horrendous cold, my soft sobs, and the musty smell. Then a gloomy light bloomed to life. My jaw dropped open in horror. It couldn't be possible. There, many yards in front of me, too far to be possible, a single bare light bulb was hanging. Its light was cold and small. It looked almost exactly like the light in my old basement. As I looked down, I yelled and began to wail loudly. Lying in the pool of light beneath the bulb was the mutilated, bloodied corpse of my dear, sweet Timothy. The man who I had loved more than anything. The man I'd wanted to marry. The man who always made me feel safe. The man who knew exactly how I liked my coffee and pancakes. His gray eyes were empty as he stared at me. Gone was the perennial warmth and love. His body was covered in deep scratches, and blood soaked his clothes. Oh my God, he was dead. He was dead. Guilt, terror, pain, all kinds of things washed over me. Tears poured down my face, and I yelled incomprehensibly, pleading for someone to help. Without warning, another identical light bulb appeared before the first. My whimpering paused. Then again, and again, my eyes widened with terror. Soon hundreds of lights were blooming into existence, like frigid miniature stars. The line of lights made a beeline towards me, with the final bulb flickering to life above my head. I heard the sizzle and hum of its electromagnetic field. I was frozen with terror, had no idea what to do. My eyes burned with tears, and I squinted. Suddenly there was a loud pop. A bulb had exploded, and I shouted with fright. I gazed down the line of lights and gasped. At first all I saw were the shards of broken glass and the remnants of the broken bulb above. It had been the bulb right at the far end. My gaze shifted. A humanoid silhouette stood beneath the broken bulb. My heart stopped dead. No. I moaned softly, my brain unable to process the terror. Then the next bulb in the line burst, and the man instantaneously stood beneath it, one light closer to me. I screamed with fear and found myself clambering to my feet. I had to get out of here. As I struggled to stand in my panic, I heard another loud pop as the next bulb blew. Then the next one exploded. Suddenly all the bulbs were exploding, one after the other, louder and louder. I saw the silhouette get closer and closer, as swift as a shadow. "No, you stay the hell away from me," I screamed, as bile forced its way into my mouth. My heart screamed from panic. As I turned, I heard a soft, raspy voice say, "We warned you." Tears flooding down my face, I groped wildly for the basement door. I could feel someone standing right behind me. I yelled in delighted surprise as my hands grasped the door handle. I heaved the door open and ran screaming up the stairs. As I got out of the building, I continued to run and scream as I welcomed the feel of warm, sticky summer air on my skin. I'd never been so happy to see the calm blue sky and the vicious midday sun. I ended up being taken to a hospital by a bunch of cops who'd seen me yelling and crying as I ran down the street. My face, my clothes were covered in dirt. My knees and elbows were scratched, but otherwise I was unharmed. I didn't dare tell them the truth. Instead, I said I'd had a panic attack, triggered by going down into the basement to find Timothy. Police Police searched the whole building, but the only thing they found in the basement that proved Timothy had been there at all was the trash bag he'd taken down. This time, the police have no leads. I miss Tim so much. I feel a numbness where he should be. Keep expecting him to just be around the next corner. Parents refuse to answer my calls. On the other hand, my parents won't stop calling. Suffice to say, I can't even think about the dark without bursting into tears. Even if there's no hope for psychological recovery, I don't think it matters. I still feel like someone's standing behind me constantly. The feeling is especially strong when my back faces a lightless room. I'm never alone now. They're always watching me, waiting for me to return to the dark. I've kept all the lights on constantly. I've not left my apartment in days. No matter how long I wait, though, I can feel them. I'm not even surprised. After all, I had not heeded the darkness's warnings. Yet the feeling those who trespass are never forgotten, and certainly never forgiven. I'm afraid that's our time for today. I do hope you've enjoyed all this cozy horror and ambience and just sitting around, enjoying fun times with good friends. I do hope you'll come back again for more cozy horror. Until then, this is Dr. Plague, wishing you a wonderful day and a spooky evening.